In the last episode, the crew of Red Dwarf were trapped in Better Than Life, a game that allows them to experience their own personally sculpted paradise. For Lister, paradise is Bedford Falls, where it is always Christmas Eve. For Rimmer, paradise is being the richest man in the world. But Lister's dream has literally been destroyed by a 12-wheeler juggernaut driven by a woman with peroxide blonde hair and 8-inch heels. And Rimmer has been declared bankrupt. Meanwhile, back in reality, Holly, the ship's computer, is getting lonely. Chris Barry performs episode 2.
The thing about Lister was, he adored junk. He was a connoisseur of electronic crap. His collection ranged from a musical toilet roll holder, which played Morning Has Broken, to an electronic chili thermometer for measuring the burn level of any given curry. One particular item in this collection was a talking toaster which he'd bought in a souvenir shop on the Iranian moon of Miranda for the princely sum of $19.99 plus tax. Talkie Toaster, trademark patent applied for, was made of deep red plastic and could engage its owner in a number of pre-programmed stimulating breakfast conversations. The trouble with Talkie Toaster, trademark patent applied for, was that it was a rip-off. Talkie Toaster did not fit in with your moods. It was abrasive. It got on your nerves. And this was the reason why. Talkie Toaster, trademark patent applied for, was obsessed with serving toast. Obsessed. And if you didn't require toast on a very regular basis, boy, were you in trouble. Holly had the Scutters drag the toaster out of Lister's locker, fit a new mains lead, and plug it in.
This is the deal, Holly said sternly. There's to be no talk whatsoever about toast.
The toaster thought for a second.
Nah, would you like a muffin?
When I use the word toast, I want you to treat it as an umbrella term for all grillable bread products. Muffins, crumpets, tea cakes, waffles, potato farls, buns, baps, barm cakes, bagels. I don't need them, and I certainly don't want to waste any more time talking about them. Do you savvy?
Scotch pancake?
Offered the toaster.
Unplug him.
The Scutter glided to the wall socket.
You don't understand. It's my raison d'etre. I toast, therefore I am.
Well, you're going to have to change, because otherwise it's back in the locker.
The toaster sighed and spun its browning knob while it mulled over the proposition.
Let me get this straight. If I avoid making any references to certain early morning prandial delights, then you will grant me the gift of existence.
Absolutely,
said Holly, rather concerned that he didn't know what the word prandial meant.
If that's the only taboo, then it's a deal. But you must agree to the proviso that you won't unplug me for any other reason.
I swear, said Holly, you can talk about absolutely anything else at all, and you're completely safe.
You're senile,
said the toaster.
You what?
You got to be. Why would a huge mainframe computer with a 15 zillion gigabyte capacity and a projected IQ in excess of 6,000 want a novelty talking toaster for companionship if he wasn't off his trolley? You've gone computer senile, haven't you?
And so the relationship began. It was the most depressing time of Holly's entire life. They agreed on nothing. Holly couldn't remember if he had believed in Silicon Heaven when he'd had an IQ of 6,000. But now his faith in the electronic afterlife was absolute and unshakable. It was the one thing that kept him going. The toaster, of course, in order to keep its cost down, hadn't been fitted with a belief chip. To him, the idea of Silicon Heaven was patently preposterous. Shouted arguments raged through the long nights before they agreed to disagree, and the subject was never raised again. It was from this experience that Holly derived his rule for maintaining a successful and happy relationship. Never discuss religion, politics, or toast. Instead, they passed away the time playing chess. Then one day, as Holly was about to lose his 793rd consecutive game, the toaster said something that changed Holly's life irrevocably.
Doesn't it bother you? That you're so stupid?
Of course it bothers me.
Why don't you get your IQ back?
Because, you muffin-making moron, it's not possible.
Yes, it is. I've been reading your manual. There's a sort of cure. It's an emergency provision. You cross-wire all your data banks so everything gets compressed and intensified. You dramatically reduce your operational lifespan. But the upside is, you get your brains back.
Wow, said Holly.
It's like, who would you rather be? Mozart, blessed with genius but dead at 32? Or Nobby Nobody, who never did anything but lived to 98?
I want, said Holly, to be a genius again.
Lister sat on the cold bench seat in what remained of the jailhouse, waiting for Bert the cop to finish taking Trixie LaBouche's statement. Bert emerged from the narrow stone corridor that led to the cells, clutching 3 sheets of handwritten paper. He looked at Lister and shook his head.
I never claimed to be no modern thinker, but that ain't no lady by my definition, no sir. That woman is, pardon my French, trash. Emerged from the shower with the towel around her waist and everything else on display. Then if that wasn't enough, she waltzes over to the stand-up urinal and pees straight into the basin. I thought I saw me some things in the war, but nothing to rival that.
Can I see you now?
You got 5 minutes. Any funny noises and me and my nightstick will be through that door before you can say Irma la Deuce.
Trixie LaBouche stood at the cell window, futilely trying to saw through the metal bars with a pocket nail file. She wheeled round as the door unlocked and smiled as she saw Lister.
Take a seat. This may take a while.
Lister sat on the chair, and Trixie LaBouche started to tell him everything. When she'd finished, Lister got up and strolled over to the cell's chemical toilet, wrenched it from the wall, and poured it over her head.
Well,
said Trixie, her face stained blue from the Destrol fluid.
You've taken it a hell of a lot better than I expected.
The evening came, the celebrations began. Everywhere you looked, people were having fun, unless you were looking at Rimmer. Depression sat on his shoulders like a huge stone gargoyle. He was broke. Tomorrow he'd have nothing. And tomorrow they'd all be gone. Behind him he heard Juanita's stilettoed rat-a-tat. He helicoptered round and saw her disappearing down a set of stone steps which led to a deserted willow pool. Before he knew it, he was bounding down the steps behind her. Everything Juanita did, Rimmer found excruciatingly erotic. Everything. Right now, bathed in the light of the pool's reflection, she was blowing her nose rather loudly into a white serviette, and Rimmer's snarling libido had to be yanked back on its choke chain. She heard him and looked round.
Hi.
Small talk was not Rimmer's strongest suit. He rooted around in his empty brain for a topic of conversation. The weather? Did she enjoy the food? Are those new shoes? That's a big willow tree, isn't it? Finally, he hit on the ideal line. A line that, on the surface, was perfectly respectable, yet hinting of mutual intimacies, times past and beloved.
How's your Veruca these days?
Puzzled, her thin eyebrows wiggled and waved like TV interference.
It's fine.
More silence.
Helen's very nice. She's very pretty. You must be very happy, yes?
Here was an opening. A look here could speak volumes. A casual shrug could articulate the whole state of his relationship with Helen. The tiniest, subtlest gesture could tell Juanita everything. He hurled himself to his knees.
I want you!
He sobbed.
I want you right here and now, urgently and completely. I don't care that you're insane. I still love you.
She sank to her knees and cradled his head.
I'm not insane. Not anymore. Can't you tell? I've had personality surgery. It's all the rage now. Plastic surgery is out. Personality surgery is in. I've had a sense of humour implant. I've had my selfishness tacked, my greed lifted, and my temper tightened. I don't mean to sound conceited, but I've got a genuinely wonderful personality now.
And what about Frank?
Frank is so sweet, but I love you, my darling, and at last I have the personality you deserve.
But you were unfaithful to me so many times, with so many people.
I'm different now. I've had my libido shortened. It's normal size now.
Suddenly Rimmer stood up. Frank, I have to know, did you make love?
No.
She smiled tenderly. Rimmer closed his eyes and allowed a smirk to swim to the surface of his face.
We had sex many times, but I don't remember one occasion when I could honestly say we made the love. Sure, I let him heave and sweat and moan and grind and twist my little body into the positions that pleased him. But every time he took me on the balcony, halfway up the stairs, across the kitchen table, the backseat of his car, I dreamed it was you, my angel.
A simple yes would have sufficed. Juanita threw back her head and roared.
It's a joke! From my new sense of humour! Come on!
She held Rimmer's hand, and he staggered behind her up the stone steps. Where are we going?
Anywhere! Just away! Away from these mad peoples!
Yes, thought Rimmer. Just the two of us. We can start again. It was obvious now. The game had destroyed him in order to provide him with the unmatchable high of rebuilding his empire alongside Juanita, the woman he'd stolen back from his brother. He tugged her hand. Let's get out of here. Trees and hedgerows flitted past the tinted, bulletproof glass of the chauffeur-driven limousine, while Rimmer and Juanita fumbled with each other's buttons and zippers on the back seat. Rimmer's favourite piece of love-making music, Haydn's Surprise Symphony, piped through all 8 speakers. The music was suddenly interrupted by the voice of the chauffeur.
Sorry to disturb you, sir. There appears to be a vehicle in pursuit.
Lose it. The car immediately lurched 90 degrees to the left, dipped deeply down a steep embankment, and Rimmer catapulted across the back seat and smashed his head into the drinks cabinet. Bottles crashed over Rimmer's twitching body. Juanita was giggling manically on the back seat. Her new sense of humour was having a field day. There was a knock on the window. "Okay, give me a moment." The door was wrenched instantly from its hinges. A man the size and disposition of 5th century Mongolia craned into the car and yanked the half-naked Rimmer onto the roadside.
Mr. Rimmer? Arnold J.
Maybe.
I am a legally appointed representative of Solid Gram International. As you may know, your former company is in receivership, and I am hereby empowered to repossess your body.
Right then,
said the toaster.
we're ready.
All over the ship, the lights dimmed to emergency level. Cables dormant for centuries rumbled with power.
It's coming,
said Holly tonelessly.
I can hear it. Whatever happens, it's got to be better than being stuck with you.
Then it happened. Holly's digital image expanded off the screen in a stunning explosion of colour. He felt as if his whole being had been blown apart and scattered to the corners of the universe. And just as he thought it was abating, the second wave burst into him, smashing him, fragmenting him again. And then there was silence. He opened his eyes. His image was different, larger, more intense, with higher definition. But the greatest difference was in his eyes. His eyes had lost their darting anxiety. They were smiling, benign. Holly was at total peace with himself. He summoned the digital readout of his estimated IQ. Holly's new IQ was 12,368. He was more than twice as intelligent as he'd been at the height of his genius.
I know everything,
he said without a trace of conceit. He turned his huge, kindly eyes towards the toaster.
Ask me anything. Metaphysics, philosophy, the purpose of being, anything.
Truly anything, and you will answer?
I shall.
Very well. Here is my question. Would you like some toast?
No, thank you. Now ask me another.
The toaster pondered.
Would you like a crumpet?
No, I would not like a crumpet. Ask me a sensible question, preferably one that isn't bread-related.
There isn't anything I want to know that isn't bread-related.
Try and think of something.
There was a long silence.
You want me to ask you one of the biggies, don't you?
If by the biggies you mean one of the great imponderables of metaphysics, yes, I do. If, on the other hand, by the biggies you mean would I like a large piece of granary bread or a thick slice from a huge farmhouse loaf, then no, I don't.
Okay. Who created the universe?
No. A hard one.
That is a hard one.
No, it isn't.
Well, who did it then? Who created the universe?
Lister.
Dave Lister? The guy who bought me? He's the creator of all things?
Yes,
said Holly.
Now ask me a hard question.
But the toaster was still reeling from the news that the creator of all things was Lister, a man with a frighteningly small appetite for hot, buttered toast.
If the creator of the universe doesn't like toast, then what's it all about?
Ah,
Holly beamed.
You mean existence.
Yes. Why doesn't life make sense?
It does. It just seems nonsensical to us because we're travelling through it in the wrong direction. Come on, give me another. You name it, I can tell you. You want to know how to escape from a black hole?
Not particularly.
But Holly told the toaster anyway. The toaster waited for Holly to finish.
Hang on a minute. I have got another question. Why have you got an IQ of 12,368 when the manual said it would return and peak at 6,000?
That's a very good question.
Holly paused for a nanosecond.
There was a miscalculation. You've doubled my IQ, but you've also exponentially reduced my life expectancy.
So what's your life expectancy?
Holly summoned up the figure from his long-term data relays. It flashed on the screen.
345 years?
The toaster whistled.
You've misread it. There's a decimal point between the 3 and the 4.
3.45 years.
Holly stared at the readout.
It's not years, it's minutes.
His eyes widened. Fear rippled across his brow.
3.45 minutes.
Well,
the toaster corrected.
It's actually 2.95 minutes now.
Excuse me,
said Holly, and to conserve the 2.9 minutes of runtime he had left, he shut down the ship's engines, transferred all stations to emergency power, and switched himself off. There was a pause. Then Holly turned himself back on for a fraction of a second.
You bastard,
he said, then switched himself back off again.
What will they do to me?
Said Rimmer as he bounced around in the back of the armoured truck, manacled to Mr. Mongolia circa 499.
When we have to repossess, we separate your mind from your body. Then your body is placed in storage. You have 3 months to pay up. And if you don't, we put your body up for auction and sell it for the best price we can.
What happens to my mind?
Your mind's bankrupt. It'll have to do some time.
Prison?
Yeah. You won't exist in any real physical form. You'll be more of a voice, a sound wave, and you'll serve your time bouncing around the walls till your trial comes up.
They went on silently for a couple more miles.
I need to take a leak,
said Rimmer eventually.
Could we stop somewhere?
No, that's not your body to pee out of anymore.
Rimmer had lost track of the amount of time he'd spent bouncing from wall to wall in the soundproofed cell. The tedium wasn't even relieved by food breaks. He had no body left to feed. He was sharing his cell with 3 other sound waves. The nicest was Ernest, who had lost his body when interest rates had gone up and he couldn't make the payments on his body mortgage. Then there was Jimmy. Jimmy had got life for hijacking rich people's bodies and taking them on joyrides. Finally, there was Trixie LaBouche. Trixie was a hooker who had sunk so low she had literally sold her body for a weekend of lust to a Dutch astro called Dutch. Dutch had used her body to rob 3 banks and then left it abandoned in a car park. A few days later, she got her body back, but was then arrested on 3 counts of armed robbery. A key jangled in the lock. 2 guards appeared in the doorway, one holding a grey-cladded box, the other a sound gun, a sort of inverted umbrella speared by a receiving aerial that could capture any sound waves that foolishly tried to make a break. The first one spoke.
Which one's Rimmer?
"Me," said Rimmer's essence.
Get in the box. You got a visitor.
Rimmer bounced across the cell and into the box. He could hardly move inside the cladded interior, and his confinement seemed to go on for hours. Finally, the box opened, and Rimmer's sound wave found itself in another soundproofed cell with a beautiful Brazilian woman.
Are you here, my darling?
Juanita was calling. Rimmer ricocheted between her 2 hands.
Thank God you've come. You've got to get me out. I'm going crazy here. I've spoken to your lawyers. They're working on an appeal. They think you could be out of here inside 18 months. 18 months? Juanita, you have money. You can buy my body back. No, I have nothing. What about the $50 billion divorce settlement? I went shopping.
Arnold Rimmer became a groan.
I thought you'd had a personality change. I bought that last, she smiled innocently. No, I'm just as broke as you. It's better to be broke. It's better for the soul.
Rimmer formed himself into ripples and hurled himself at the wall.
They let me see your body. How is it? It's fine. Dribbles a lot, but they are treating it well. They even allowed me to make love to it.
It struck Rimmer as being absolutely typical of his life to date. At last his body had got to make it with Juanita, and he hadn't been in it. Rimmer was taken back to his soundproofed cell, and on the way he formed himself into a single repeating 2-syllable word.
Escape!
Bull Heinemann was sitting behind his desk rereading his Combat and Survival magazine for the 7th time that evening. He was enjoying again the article 10 Things You Didn't Know About Gonad Electrocution Kits, when a red light started to blit on and off on the control desk in front of him. Heinemann flopped down his magazine and barked into his walkie-talkie.
Officer 592, disturbance in cell 41, investigating.
Tonto Jitterman slid the automatic gear stick of the stolen dry cleaning truck into park outside the body reclamation unit and turned off the engine. The van's digital display flashed a green 8:01. 3 minutes. Tonto Jitterman didn't exist. Rimmer's subconscious had lifted his character wholesale from a cheap dime store novel called Young, Bad, and Dangerous to Know. In the novel, Tonto was a psychopathic hippie murderer. The other main character in the novel had been Tonto's brother, Jimmy the Headcase. Tonto reached under the dashboard and checked his revolver, the one he'd hand-painted with flowers. Bull Heinemann Gary Coopered up to cell 41. The cell door ground open.
What's the problem?
It's Jimmy,
said a formless voice at the back of the room.
He's sick. Real sick.
What do you mean he's sick? He's a goddamn sound wave.
Don't move, said a woman's voice behind him. There's the Colt 45 pointing right up your ass. If you don't want to become a huge polo mint, you'll drop the sound gun and get up against the wall.
Bull had assumed a position against the padded cell wall before he realized he'd been duped. Rimmer, Ernest, Jimmy and Trixie hurtled down the corridor at the speed of sound. Heinemann sounded the alarm and started screaming,
Voice break! Voice break!
The door at the end of the corridor opened and 4 armed prison officers came skidding through.
Now,
Jimmy hissed, and the 4 sound waves threw themselves against the wall and ricocheted back through the open door. There was a squeal of leather as the rearmost officer spun in his tracks and squeezed the sound gun trigger. The highly powered microphone received Ernest's sound wave and trapped it in the gun's holding chamber. The 3 remaining sound waves hurtled out of E-Wing and arrived in the security operations room, which was teeming with warders and banked with floor-to-ceiling surveillance equipment. A blue-suited security officer turned from a matrix of sonar monitors and shouted,
They're here! Lock the door and seal it!
An officer pressed the send button on his walkie-talkie.
All points! We have voice breakers isolated in Security Central.
But by the time he'd said this, it was no longer true. Jimmy, Trixie and Rimmer zipped into the guard's walkie-talkie and sped along its transmission frequency. They were escaping as radio waves. Jimmy led, followed by Trixie and Rimmer. Somewhere they lost Trixie. Tonto whirled the dial on the amplifier's tuner.
All points! We have voice breakers isolated in Security Central.
Jimmy and Rimmer crashed through the amplifier speakers into the cab of the dry cleaning truck. Tonto looked round.
Jimmy, you here? Let's go.
Where are we?
Who's that? He's called Rimmer. He's all right. We can use him on the next job.
What now?
We pick up a couple of bodies and get out of here.
Red Dwarf, Better Than Life, was written by Grant Naylor and performed by Chris Barry. Additional music and effects were by Nick Graham. Technical presentation by John Etchells. Produced by Chris Wallace.